Finnegans Wake, Part 1, Chapter 4. As the lion in our tear garden remembers the nenufars of his Nile, shall Arius forget Ariun, or Bogas the Barragams, or the Marmarazels from Marmaniere? It may be, Tots Wittersons for an agin in Twentygh have signal posted, what in our breathing bust, the besieged bedreamt him still and solely of those lilies undeveiled which had undone him, gone for age, and knew not the watchful treachers at his wake, and theirs to stay. Fui, fui, camera misses, zeepy zopy, Larson lads, zin zin, zin zin. It may be we most on his hastened selves to declare it, that he reglimmed, presaw, the fields of heat and yields of wheat, where corn gold easit, shamed and shone. It may be we haben to upspeak a bitty door our good township's corrants want we know it, that with his deep-seeing insight had not wishing oft been but good time wasted. Within his patriarchal shamana, broad-stained Bove city, twiddle be, he conscious of enemies, a King Billy Whitehorsed in Finglas Mill, prayed, as he sat on anxious seat, Kunt ye niet gift me to, but a peer saft abodes. During that 3 and a half hours agony of silence, ex profundis malorum, and bred with unfeigned charity, that his word wonder, and angles to the teeth, who nomened Nash of Girhash, would go any old where in the weeping world on his mottled belly, the rab, the creep on sneed, for milk, music, or married mistresses. Might mercy to providential benevolences, who hates prudency's astuteness, unfold into the first of a distinguished dynasty of his posteriors. Black-faced Connemara's, not of the fold, but elder children of his household, his most besetting of ideas, Pace, his 12 predominant passions, being the formation as in favoured climes, where the meadow of honey is guest-friendly and the mountain of joy receives, of a truly criminal stratum, Ham's crib-cracking yeggs, thereby at last eliminating from all classes and masses with directly derivative decasualization, sigarius sic, vindicate urbis terrorum sicker. And so, to mark a bank tile the arter, the obedience of the citizens help the health of the old. Now, God, let us leave theories there and return to here's here. Now here, 'tis gold again. The teak coffin, pew glass panel fitted, feet to the east, was to turn in later, and pitly-patly near the porpoise, materially affecting the cause. And this, lever, is the thing how. Any number of conservative public bodies, through a number of select and other committees having power to add to their number, before voting themselves and himself town, port, and garrison, by a fit and proper resolution, following a court's order of the ground wet, once for all out of plotty existence, as a forest cut, so you mate Skippy might to you, cotton runner, on a new pack of clerds, made him, while his body still persisted, their present of a protum grave in Moyalta of the best Lough Neagh pattern, then as much in demand among Misonicans as the Isle of Man today among limniphobes. Walked even. It was in a fairly fishy kettle-carry, after the Fianna's foreman had taken his handful, enriched with ancient woods and dear duchy deeplands mid, which were an old knoll and a trout-beck. Veiny vein of her ogiary, and a chatty Sally with any wilter wot who would ongle her as Isaac did to the tickle of his rod, and watch her waters of, her sillying waters of. And there now brown Peter our ripple, may there a quilt gild lightly over his somnolutant form. Who for you lies his last, by the wrath of bog, like the erst cursed Hun in the bed of his true blue Donahue. Best. The was to have been underground heaven, or Moe's paradise, which was probably also an inversion of a fallophorus, intended to foster wheat crops and to ginder up tourist trade, its architect, Monsieur Pure Lachasse, having been obcecated lest he should petrify such an error, while the contractors, Messrs. T.A. Burkitt and L.O. Turhos, were made invulnerably venerable, first in the West, our Mr. Builder, Castle Villainous, openly damned and blasted by means of a hydromine. System sowing and belting, exploded from a reinvented TNT bombing post, up a hoy of 11 and 30 wing rests, circuiter, to sternboard, out of his aerial torpedo. Alton Dynaman, contacted with the expectant minefield by tins of improved ammonia lashed to her shield-plated gunwale, and fused into tripopcables, slipping through those and playing down from the conning tower into the ground battery fuse boxes, all differing as clocks from keys, since nobody appeared to have the same time of beard. Some saying by their oorlog it was 6 striks to 9, more holding with the Ryan invoked it was Dane to 5. He afterwards, whenever his blather began to fail off him, and his rough bark was wholly husky, and, stoop by stoop, he neared it, woodman spare, carefully lined the ferroconcrete result with root-proof bricks and mortar, fast to fast, and retired beneath the heptarchy of his towerettes, the Beauchamp, byword, bull and lion, the white, the wardrobe, and the bloodied, so encouraging instep and owls, hats be believed, additional useful counsels public with hoofed-off dealings, which were well holden of the ladykants to hurl out such as the Breeders' Union, the Guild of Merchants of the Staple AUC, to present unto him with vulnerable pomp. Over and above that a stone slab with the usual Macpella address of valediction, a very fair-worded instance of false-meaning etymology. We have done ours, go health with you, here Whippet, over-given it, skidoo. But the house and all aboard shoops, show coffins, winding sheets, goodbye beer chips, cinerary urns, lay-aloud glasses, snuff chests, poteen tubs, lacrymo vases, hooden doses, reek waterbeckers, break middles, zoot zacks for eat lost, including up your health and rookworst, and meathworth and forkin pootsies, and, for that matter, javel also, any kind of inhumationary bric-a-brac for the adornment of his glass-stone Onofrium, would, met these train of conditions, naturally follow, alas, in the ordinary course, enabling that round the worlder wandering wight did such as pass him to live all, safe humbly, the pre-senile days of his life of opulence, ancient ere decrepitude, late Lent's last lenience, till stoffering stage, wailing away the whole of the while, hypnos chilia Ionian, leith loud between explosion and re-explosion, dollar water, Honder thunder, from Grosskop to Megapod, embalmed of grand age, rich in death anticipated. But abide zeit summon serving, rise after fall, blue blitz bolted from there, knowing the hinge-worms of the hallmarks of habitationlessness, buried burrowing in Gehinnon, to proliferate through all his unterwealth, seam by seam, shoal on shoal, and revisit our upper crust sidereal of utilitarios, the divine one, the hoarder hidden propagating his plutor popular progenium of pots and pans and pokers and puns, from bidden land to boughten land, the spearway for the sportaway. The other spring offensive on the heights of Abraham may have come about all quite by accidents. Fortune runs her, for Breda Brewer had at length persuaded him to have himself to be as sepulchrally buried as the murdered Shaun of Fintown. Had not been 3 monads in his watery grave, what vigilantes in ridings then, and sweet wine pledges with ardapple frittling. When putrefaction Dreyfus as ever began to ramp, the boys are parching. The Hoodinwinkle gave the signal, and the blessing paper freed the flood. Why did the patrician make him scarce with his gruntings? Because the Druiven were musketing at the door, from both Celtiberian camps, granting at the onset, for the sake of argument, that men on the 2 sides in New South Ireland and Vetera Uland, bloomin' and pill-faces, during the ferment with the Pope, or on the Pope, had, mores or lets, grant ideas grunted. All conditions, poor cans and dives more, each, of course, on the purely defensive, since the Eternals were owl-wise on their side every time, were drawn towards their Bellona's black bottom, once wool-white swots, oh he woe, how be crimed, be curse-kissed, and be dumb-twat. Some for want of proper feeding in youth, others already caught in the honourable act of slicing careers for family and carvers in conjunction. And if emaciated enough, the person garroted may have suggested to whomever he took the ham of, the plain being involved in darkness, low cirquaggery, nay, even the first old wugger of himself in the flesh, wigissimus, incardined, when false-sighted by the if such he was bully on the hill, for there had circulated freely fairly among his opposition the feeling that in so hibernating Massa Iwaka, who, previous to that demi-detached life, had been known of barmecidal days, cook said, between soups and savours, to get outside his own length of rainbow trout and terts at a tarn, as no man of woman born, nay, could, like the great crested brave, devour his 3 scorton of roach per life day, aye, and as many minnow a minute. The big mix made gibbet choke him, was, like the salmon of his ladder leap, all this time of totality secretly, and by suckage, feeding on his own misplaced fat. Ladies did not disdain those pagan iron times of the first city, called after the ugliest Danadoon, when a frond was a friend in need to carry, as earwigs do their dead, their soul soiled to the earth ball, where in death we shall calm decline, our legacy unknown. Venuses were giglibly temptatrix, Vulcans guffawably eruptious, and the whole wives' world frockful of fickles. Fact, any human enyon you liked, any noon or after, would take her bare godkin out, or even pair of him, look a do, and prettily pray with him, or with em even. Every he to her taste, long for luck, tepet or tape petter, and take pettest of all, tip. Well she'd woo, and will she's win, but how the dear knowed where she'd marry? Arbour, bucket room, caravan, ditch, coach, carriage, wheelbarrow, dung cart? Kate Strong, a widow, tip. She pulls a lane picture for us in dreary dream setting, glowing very visual of old Dumpling as she nosed it, a home-like cottage of Elphinstone with droppings of biddies, stinking pushies, moggies doggies, rotten witchawobbles, festering rubbages and beggars' bullets, if not worse, sending salmofarious germs in gleefully through the smithereen panes. Widow Strong, then, as her weaker had turned him to the wall, tip, 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 did most of all the scavenging from good King Hamloch's golden Dane, through her lean besom, cleaned out sparingly, and her bare statement reads that, there being no macadamized sidetracks on those old necropolitan nights in, barring a footbatter, Brian's Causeway, bordered with speedwell, white clover, and sorrel or wood nose, which left off, being beaten, where the plaintiff was struck, she left down, as scavengers, who will be scavengers must, her filth dump near the Serpentine in Fornix Park, at her time called Finewell's Keepsaker, but later Totobop tossed Pat's Purge. That Dangerfield circling butcher's wood, where fireworker O'Flaherty engaged a nutter of Castle Mallards, and for Archer stunned Turk, all over which fossil footprints, boot marks, finger signs, elbow dints, breech bows, ASO were all successively traced of a most involving description. What subtler time-place of the world than such wolf's belly castrament to will hide a leave her from Thursman's brandy hands or a love letter, lostfully hers, that would be lost on ma. Then, when ructions ended, then here where race began, and by 4 hands of forethought the first babe of reconcilement is laid in its last cradle of Hume, sweet Hume. Give over it, and no more of it. So pass the pick for child's sake. O men, for here all highest sprack for Christians as for propaganda fides, and his nuptial eagles sharp through beaks of prey. And every mournful man of us, poem by poem, falls back into this terrene. As it was, let it be, says he, and it is as though where Agni araflammed, and Mithra monished, and Shiva slew, as Mayamutras the abluvial waters of Noarchic memory withdrew. Windingly go harksome to some hasty, wasty timberman torch priest, flame and fan, the ward of the wind that lightened the fire that lay in the wood that Jove bolt at his rude word. Posidonius, O fluctuary, lave that bloody stone as it is. What are you doing, you dirty minx, in his big 3-block way up your path? Slip around, you, by the rare of the minsters. And you, take that barrow back where you got it, McShane's, and go the way your old one went, Hatchetsbury Road. And gish, how they gushed away, the penny fares, a whole school for scamper, with their sashes flying sish behind them, all the little pearly pets. Issa la chapelle, any lookins, please? Yes. The viability of Vicinals, if invisible, is invincible, and we are not trespassing on his corns either. Look at all the plots, Fluminian. If this was Hannibal's walk, it was Hercules' work, and 100,000 of the unemancipated slaved the way. The mausoleum lies behind us, O Agigasta, multi-populi pater, and there are milestones in their Kedmilias, faltering along the Thames track by Bram and Anton Hermes. Per omnibus secular secularum, amen. But the past has made us this present of a raider horde. So more boher, O Cano, though rainy hidden your rhino hide, and if he's not a Romeo, you may scallop your hat. whereunder in the fane of Saint Fiacre, halt. It was hard by the house there, plainly on this dissoluded and a booken cold spot. Rupestric then, resurface that now is, that Luttrell sold if Luttrell bought. In the saddle of the Brennans now Malastra place pass, versts and versts from true civilization, not where his dreams top their troms halt, beneath there, but where live land yon tide mered with the wild, saltly with flood, that the attacker, a Kropatkin, though under medium and between colours with truly native pluck, engaged the adversary, who had more in his eye than was less to his leg, but whom for plunder's sake he mistook in the heavy rain to be Oglethorpe, or some other Ginkis par apparently, to whom the head-and-heelest chickenest egg bore some Michelangelo-esque resemblance, making use of sacrilegious language to the defect that he would challenge their hemispheres to exterminate them, but he would canonize the life out of him and lay him out contritely as smart as the had night prayers said, the Paternosters, 3 Paternosters, and a couplet of hell moeries. Tout et sacre pour un sacre, femme ma barbe on home nourrice. At the same time, so as to plug well let the blubby whale goats out of him, catching host of an oblong bar he had, and with which he usually broke furnitures, he rose and stick at him. The border incident pre-repeated itself. The pair, whether they were Nipoluano engaging Wei-Ling Tao, or the Raskins trying to reconnoitre the General Bukalef, man may not say, struggled apparently for some considerable time, the cradle rocking equally to one and oppositely from the other on its law of capture and recapture. Under the all-in rules around the book safe, fighting like Purple Top and Tipperary Swede, sacramented service of divine zeal. And in the course of their tussle, the taller man, who had opened his bully bowl to beg, said to the miner who was carrying the worm, a handy term for the portable distillery which consisted of 3 vats, 2 jars, and several bottles, though we purposely say nothing of the stiff, both parties having an interest in the spirits. Let me go, Pauline, I hardly knew ye. Later on, after the solstitial pause for refreshment, the same man, or a different and younger him of the same ham, asked in the vermicular with a very ugly Juchin grin, was 6 Victorios 15 pigeon takey offer you? He tell he me, strong fella, by picky-pocky 10 to foul months behind the side? There were some further collida banter and severe ties to convert for the best part of an hour, and now a Woden affair in the shape of a Webley. We at once recognized our old friend Ned of so many ill or temperate letters, fell from the intruder, who, as stuck as that cat to that mouse in that tube of that Christchurch organ, did the image of girl cloud pensive flout above them light young charm, in ribbons and pigtail, whereupon became friendly and, saying not to tear his shirt, wanted to know, laying all joking and knobkeries aside, if his changed companion, who stuck still to the invention of his strong-box, with a tenacity corroborating their mutual territorial rights, happened to have the loose change of a 10-pound crickler about him at the moment, adding that hapso he would pay him back the 6 Vic odds, do you see, out of that for what was taken on the man of samples last Juni or July. Do you follow me, Captain? To this the other, Billy with the bull, who had mummed and mawed up to that, for he was hesitancy carried to excelsis, rather amusedly replied, would you be grossly surprised, Hill, to learn that, as it so happens, I honestly have not such a thing as the least chance of a tin-panned crackler anywhere about me at the present moment, but I believe I can see my way, as you suggest, it being Yuletide or Judenfest, and it's mad nuts sun for you when it's hatter's hair's bon for me, to advance you something like 4 and 7 pence between hopping and trapping, which you might just as well have, boy box, to buy JJ&S with. There was a minute's silence before memory's fire rekindling, and then, heart alive, which at the very first wind of JJ and Wick's ears pricked up, the starving gunman, strike him pink, became strangely calm and forthright swear by all his large personal that the thorn tree of sure might ramify up his sure fan to the locks of pointlicks, but he would go good to him sometime, marks my word for't, for a chip off the old flint in the Nictean glossary, which purveys a prioric roots for a posteriorius tongues. This is not language at any sense of the world, and one might as fairly go and kiss your sprogs as fail to certify whether the war trophy alluded at some lives earlier was that something like a jug to what? A cocktable. And remarking in languidoily, seemingly much more highly pleased than tongue could tell at this opening of a lifetime and the foretaste of the Dunbank Pearl Mothers and the boy to wash down, which he would feed to himself in the road cal at Talat, and then into the good woman at Ringsend, and after her in at Conway's Inn, at Blackrock, and, first of all, Kirkby, where appetite would keenest be at a funeral fair or fun fain real, Adam and Eve's in Quantity Street by the grace of gamey Queen Tailta, her will and testament. You stunning little Southdowner, I'd know you anywhere, Declaney. Let me truthfully tell you, in or out of the extinction of life, and who the hell else be your Blanche Patch, on the bony part. Go bowl I struck this dilate night of nights, by golly. My hat, you have some bully German grit, Sundowner. He spud in his Faust accent. He toped the raw best, pardon. He poked his pack a tip as a tap, and he talked his friend's sleeve. And with French hand on the portly folium of hastes and leisures, about to continue that the queer mixture exchanged the pax in embrace, or poxy is practised between brothers of the same breast. Hallelujah, Hallelujah, Allah, and, having ratified before the God of the day, their Torgan truce, which belittlers have schmockled the treating to cognac, turning his fez menial straight in the direction of Moscas. He first got rid of a few mist-millers and horoushus and levanted off with tubular turbulence at a bull's run over the ass-back bridge, spitting his teeth on Ruths with a 7 and 4 in Danegeld, and their humour o' hurlbat or other uncertain weapon of lignum vitae, but so evermore ruminescent of a toboggan poop, picked up to keep some crow-plucking appointment with some rival Rialtos anywheres between Peerage and the Little Horn, while this poor Delaney, who they left along with a Confederate fender behind and who, albeit balls bluffed, bore up wonderfully, wonder all of it, with a whole number of plum-sized contusiums, plus a la salle bruised coccyx, all over him, reported the occurrence in the best way he could to the flabber gaze of the whole lab, giving the paddy banners the military salute as for his excellencies the O'Daffy, in justifiable hope that, in nobile aurorum review of the hugely satisfactory conclusion of their negotiations, and the jungle monkish agreement The derivative, some lotion or fomentation of poppy heads, would be generously exhibited to the parts. At the nearest watch-house in Vicar Lane, the white ground of his face all covered with diagonally red-crossed, non-fatal mammalian blood, as proof positive of the seriousness of his character, and that he was bleeding in self-defiance, stanch it, from the nostrils, lips, pavilion, and palate, while some of his hitter's hairs had been pulled off his nut's head by Colt, though otherwise his all-round health appeared to be middling along, as it proved most fortunate that not one of the 206 bones and 501 muscles in his torso was a whit the worse for her whacking. Her who? Now then, leaving clashing ash, brawn, and muscle, and brass made to oust earthenborn, and rock crystal to wreck isinglass, but worming along gradually for our savings, back towards Mother Waters, so many miles from Bank and Dublin Stone, olympiating even to the 11th dynasty to reach that 32nd Hamloch. And to the question of Boney's unlawfully obtaining a pierced paraflam and claptrap fireguard, there crops out the still more salient point of the politest leanings and town pursuits of our forebear, El Don de Dunelli. May his shipdick stick in the bottle of the river, and all his cruisers stock locked in the burrow of the seas. Who, when within the black of your toenail, sir, of being mistakenly ambushed by one of the Udavedas, and as close as made no matter, ma'am, to being KO'd off hard when the Huguenot heckler with the Peter the Painter wanted to hole him, was consistently practicing the first of the primary and imprescriptible liberties of the Pacific subject by circulating, be British, boys to your belly bone, and chuck a chum a chance, alongst one of our unprohibited cemetery throughfarts, open to buggy and bike, to walk Wellington Park Road, with a curb or Quaker's quack nostrum under his oxter and his alpenstock in his red hand, a highly commendable exercise, or number 2 of our acta legitima plebia, on the brink, beware the balk a man at his will, of taking place upon a public seat, to what? Bear by butts, most easterly, but all goes west, of Blackpool bridges, as a public protest in nature like of ice, without intent to annoy either, being praised good thankfully for the wrath-bereaved ringdove, and the fear-stung boa constrictor, and all the more right jolly well pleased which he was at having other people's weather. But to return to the Atlantic and Phoenicia proper, as if that were not enough for anyone, but little headway, if any, was made in solving the was-not-to-be crime conundrum, when a child of Mam, Festy King, of a family long and honourably associated with the tar and feather industries, who gave an address in old Plomanch Mayo of the Saxons in the heart of the foul-famed Pochine district, was subsequently hailed up at the Old Bailey on the Calends of Mars, under the incompatibly framed indictment of both accounts, from each equinoxious points of view, the one fellow's fetch being the other fellow's person, that is to see, flying cushets out of his overalls, and making fesses amongst his forces on the field. Oh yeah, when the prisoner, soaked and methylated, appeared in dry dock, a patently ambrosiorialized, like Curse's corduroy caricature, wearing besides stains, rents, and patches, his fight shirt, straw braces, sou'wester, and a policeman's corkscrew trousers, all out of the true, as he had purposely torn up all his Kimtry Manx bespokes in the Mamer time, deposing for his execution in all the floors of sparse in the Royal Irish vocabulary, how the whole patter jag Martin trippy azite suet and all the sulphate of copperas had fallen off him quarts unaccountably, like the crystallizations of alum uneven, while he was trying for to stick fire to himself. In feet, he was dripping as he found upon stripping for a pipkin of malt, as he feared the cold rain. It was attempted by the Crown, P.C. Robert, to show that King, Eloise Crowbar, once known as Melicky, impersonating a climbing boy, rubbed some pixies of Annie Louisville Peatsmore o'er his face, plucks and pusses, and a clane torf of the best means of disguising himself, and was to the middle white fair in Mudford of a Thursday, feasts of peeler and pole, under the ill-assumed names of Tykingfest and Rabwork, picked him by him and Anthony out of a telephone book, allegedly with a pedigree pig unlicensed and a hyacinth. They were on that sea by the plain of Ear 999 years, and they never cried crack or ceased from regular paddle-wicking till that they landed their two and a trifling selves, a matched camel and ass, grey-beard and suckling, priest and pauper, matra, matron and merry meg, into the middle of the mud-storm. The gathering, convened by the Irish agricultural and prepostural organizations to help the Irish muck to look his brother Dane in the face, and attended, thanks to Larry, by large numbers of Christies and Jews totems, to spite of the deluge, was distinctly of a scattery kind, when the bally bricken he could get no good of, after cock o' the walking through a few fancy-fought mains, ate some of the doorweg, the pikey later selling the gentleman ratepayer because she, Francie's sister, that is to say, ate a whole side of his, the animal's, sty, on a struggle street, Quista Troya, in order to pay off his surlick, 6 doubloons, 15 arrears of his, the villain's, not the rumbler's, rent. Remarkable evidence was given anon by an eye, ear, nose, and throat witness, whom Wesley and chapel-goers suspected of being a plainclothes priest, W.P., situate at Null Medical Square, who, upon letting down his rice in peace-green cover-disc, and having been sullenly cautioned against yawning while being grilled, smiled. He had had a one bumper at parting from Mrs. Mulrow in the morning, and stated to his solicitor under his more must accents, God bless, that he slept with a bona fides, and that he would be there to remember the filth of November, hot and airing rowdy-o, which, with the jubilees of Juno and the dates of old anxiety, was going, please the rainmaker, to descends within ephemerides of profane history. All one with Tournay, Yestosley, and Talmora, and one thing which would particularly strike a person of such sorely tried observational powers as Sam, him, and Moffat, though there's not the reason why. The striking thing about it was that he was petrified to see, hear, taste, and smell, as his time of night, how Hyacinth O'Donnell, B.A., described in the calendar as a mixer and word painter, with part of a civis pactum, Gaeltacht for dung fork, on the fair green at the hour of 24 o'clock, the bullicacity of the Friedhofer, to sack, sock, stab, and slaughter, single-handed another two of the old kings, Gosh MacGael and Roaring O'Crian Jr., both changelings, unlocalized, of no address, and in non-communicables, between him and whom, ever since wallops before the Mise of Lewes, bad blood existed on the ground of the boar's trespass on the bull, or because he first parted his polar beaver hair in 2 ways, or because they were creep fox daunt grosshoppers over a nippy and a noveletta, or because they could not say meath, mute and daft, meath. The litigants, he said, local congsmen and Donalds, kings of the Arryns and the Dalkeys, kings of Mud and Tory, even the goat king of Kilorglin, were egged on by their supporters in the shape of better women with bow-strung hair, the carrot a genuine ruddiness, waving crimson petties and screaming from Isad's tower top. There were cries from the thicksets in court and from the MacDublins on the Bowhern a breen of, "Mind the bank from Banagher Mixter, produce O'Donnor, aye, exhibit his relics, boo, use the tongue more, give lip less." But it oozed out in Deadman's dark scenery court, through cross-examination of the case-hardened testis, that when and where that knife of knives, the 3-partied ambush was laid, roughly spouting around half hours twixt dusk and dawn. By water hoses metal Europaic time, near stop and think, high chiefs eververins, and only abfoltry in all the land. There was not as much light from the window as would dim a child's altar. The mixer, accordingly, was bluntly broached, and in the best basil to boot, as to whether he was one of those lucky cocks for whom the audible, visible, noseable, edible world existed. That he was only too cognitively, cogit abundantly sure of it, because living, loving, breathing, and sleeping, morpho melosophono panacreatis, he was most significantly did, whenever he thought, he heard, he saw, he felt, he made a bell clipper, whether he was practically sure too of his lugs and truys names in this king and blouseman business, that he was pediculously so, certified as cad could be lying. Be the loney I will. It was morbus o' somebody, a quite Thursday's sun, a satyr in weddings. And how did the green-eyed mister arrive at the B.A.? That it was like his pole, a cross-grained trapper with murtiad ogs, autherated airs, inquiline nays, and a twitterous mouth. He would be. Who could bit you at to a 10-yeared fool when I saw Astrod? Barra jobera, some major boar too, iguinis, and with tumblerist legs, redipped nominated Helmingham, Urchinwine, Rotter, Egbert, Cromwell, Odin, Maximus, Esme, Saxon, Asa, Vercingetorix, Ethelwolf, Ruprecht, Idwala, Bentley, Osmond, Dysart, Yggdrasilman. Holy Saint Eiffel, the very phoenix. It was Chudley McNall once more between the Defodates and the dumb scene. The 2 child spies was breasing him osa de volag, but the renting of his rock was from the 3 wicked Vancouverers forests, bent down a wits, art thou sure? You Betty, Cumberland comes. One of the Oxowitz, one of the Oxman's thingabossers have had, and had he been refreshed by the founts of bounty playing, there is a pain, Alaland in Long's gurgling barrel. A loss of lorded word, and a lack of Sir Philip a surgeonet, shower adown, could suck more gargling bubbles out of the 5 lamps in Porteron's praise. Wurgling and marries, and whose wouldn't, laving his leave time in Blackpool. But of course he could call himself Tem too, if he had time too. You but he could any Tom, when he pleased, win in place. A stoker temptated by eavesdripping against the driver who was a witness as well. Sacred avatar, how the devil did they guess it? 2 dreamiums in 1 dromium. Yes and no error, and both as like as a duel of lentils. Precisely. So he was pelted out of the coram populo, was he? By the powers that be he was. The prince in principle should not expose his person? Mac of Uole, Ruskayemen, camarade. Sooner Galwegian, he would say. Not unintoxicated, fair witness, drunk as a fishop. Asked to whether she minded whither he smoked, not if he boxed into phlegms. Anent his ejaculations to his cross-can Lorna Casa, it was corso and curso on courser again. The gracious miss was we no doubt sensible how yellow-watty on the forks was altered. That she actually was, oh doubt me not. As to his religion, if any, it was the see you Sunday sort. Exactly what he meant by a pederast prig, be Jacobs, just a gent who prayed his Lent. And if middle-class Portavoris was a usual beast, by night as useful as a vomit to a shorn man. If he had rognarized their courts martials, tatten days he had. Lindendally, Coker Skillies, spell me gart without a gate, hardly a drope. The grazing rights, Mrs. Magistra Martinetta, expired with the expiry of the goat sire, if they were not mistaken. That he exactly could not tell the worshipfuls, but his mother in waiters had the recipes for the price of the coffin, and that he was there to tell them that herself was the velocipede that could tell them kit-kat. A maundering tongue and a poundering jowl. Farther order about the matters of pronunciation, distributatory endings, and we recommends quer hercum, no answer, onde gentium fe, no Are you not dazzling on the age of a volcano? Sire, I am indeed, and how old of him! He was intendant to study Pulu, which was meant in a shirt of 2 shifts, maid, or up fin 3 hat and ladder. That was a head and thighs under the bush at the sun face, would bait a serpent to a mill race through the heather. Arm-bird colour defdom methnic fort perhaps. Sure in Glomsk's handy jottle feastin as well. Hawky Jasons then in a pidgegesis, on a pontiff's order, as sure as there's an ital on attack. As Galoli bit to Joss, Lily into Luli. But why this handkerchief? And whence this second tone, son yet son? He had the cow-tar in his boxer's flay of face. So this that sola sistras, setting odds evens at defiance, took the loud from Lobberiter. What displays Tob, Dilky and Halley, not been greatly in love with the game, and changing the vendors, from the king's head to the republican's arms. As to the pugnacities he vinxed from the flagfall to the anti-post during the effrays round Father Time's beckside, and the regents in the plantstone reigning, with the skiddy stars in the Morcron wind-up, how they appealed to him then. That it was Wildfire's night on all the Betty Gallaghers, Mick Michael's swords shrieking shracks through the Wilkinses, and Neck and Nichols toasting forks pricking prongs up the tunny bladders. Let there be fight, and there was fought. On the site of the angels, you said. Guinea's Gap, he said, between what they said and the pussy kitties, in the middle of the garth then, that they mustn't touch it. The devoted couple was or were only two disappointed solistresses on the job of the unfortunate class on Saturn's mountain fort. That was about it, yeah. And Camillus then said to Gamillus, I should know you? Perfectly. And Gamillus then said to Camillus, yes, your brother? Absolutely. And if it was all about that, egregious, sir, about that and the other, if he was not alluding to the hole in the wall, that he was when he was not alluding from the hole in the woman. Briefly, how such big-and-gnaw finally struck him now, like the crack that broke the bank in Moty Farnham. Whether he fell in with what they meant, curse that he suppoxed he did. Tos Taurus, Tomers Tom, the rudest rotter in Roebuckdom, Sir Tropical and subhuman, if it was, in Yapanoi's language, ach bad clap. Ogs and oars with rain, Kelly, to put it tertianly, we wrong, shocking. Such as Turley pierced our realies, that he might never that night, trially and rurally, bloody old foul moklin book where a war a scortum strom paper or nenny cock sappa stippa tappa papa tuppa strippa pock pack papanak. You have it right. Mirdriak and oinkuish. But a new complexion was put upon the matter when to the perplexity uncondemnatory bench whereon Punic judgeship strove with penal law, the senior king of all, Pegger Festy, as soon as the outer layer of Stockholmok had been removed at the request of a few live jurors, declared in a loud burst of poesy through his Brythonic interpreter on his oath, Muith paiths huith as vera puram wir Riosmus, whereas take notice be the relics of the bones of the story Boker that was 8B Cleopatrick, the sow, princess of parked porkers, of foregod, and all their honours in King's Commons that, what he would swear to the tyranny of Dundalgan, or any other tyranny, if live turkles followed him about, sure that was no steal, and that, nevertheless, what was deposited from that eyebald earbig nose knaving cutthroat, he did not fire a stone either, before or after he was borne down, and up to that time. And, incidentalizing that they might talk about Markarthy, or they might walk to Balastarty, or they might join the neighbour party and come on to Porterfeud, this the Sockdolager had the neck to endorse, with the head bowed on him over his outturned northeaster, by protesting to his lip-readers, with a just been cleaned barefacedness, a beam of moonlight's hope, in the same Trelawney, what he would impart, please bench, to the Lure Josses, and the gentlemen's in juries, and the four of masterers, who had been all those yarns yearning for that good one about why he left Dublin, that Amrita Beaker coddling doom, as in Inishman was as good as any cantonato. If he was to perish by the mark stake before the dorming of the morn, he scold never ask to see sight or light of this world, or the other world, or any either world of Tyrn and Og, as true as he was there in that jackabox that minute, or weald or wind, no thanks to use, the inexhaustible wasselhorn taught of Iskibausch, the health up, the wealth up, the unknown god of the fire of the moving way of the hawks with his heroes in war horror, if ever in all his exchequered career he up or lave a chancery hand to take or throw the sign of a mortal stick or stone at man, Yolem or Salvation Army either before or after being baptized down to that most holy and every blessed hour. Here, upon the half-kneed castle knockers attempting kithogishly to lilt his holy mess the pause, and make the sign of the Roman god Helix Fey, Zarashi Azerst. In his excitement, the laddo had broken extra Castilian, into which the whole audience perseguired and pursued him all podrida. Out broke much yellowsters from owners in the hill, ha! In which, under the mollification of Methegrin, the testifier reluctantly, but with ever so ladylike indecorum, joined. Ha ha! The hilario hoot of peggars wind up, come justled as neatly with the tristestone of the wet pinters as were they ischiatil equals of opposites, evolved by a one same power of nature or of spirit iste, as the sole condition and means of its him and her manifestation, and polarized for reunion by the synthesis of their antipathies. Distinctly different were their duodestinies, whereas the maidies of the bar, a peerless trentine, a lunarized score, when the eranthus mirrored, shone the post, fluttered and flattered around the willingly pressed, nominating him for the swiney prize, complimenting him, the captivating youth, on his having all his senses about him, stinking hyacinths through his curls, oh fiend, oh dear, and bringing bosses to his cheeks, their masculine Irisher rose, his knees clear, and legando round his nice new neck for him, and pitsy canyoling his woolly wags, with their dindy-dandy sugar-de-candy macrame porcelain flowns courier to believe them of all his untiring young dames, and send treats in their times. Amen. But it was not unobserved of those presents their worships, how, of one among all, her deputized to defame him by the Lunar Sisters Celibacy Club, a love-looking leap girl, all alonely, Gensha Gemma of the Megiddy-Cullig reeks, he, wan and pale in his unmixed admiration, seemed blindly, mutely, tastelessly, tactlessly, enamorate, with here upon him in shining aminglement, the shame of his hissue shifting into the shimmering of hers. Youthsy, beautsy, he's her chap, and she'll tell memmas when she gaes home. Till the wild wish of her shishay melted most musically mid the dark, deep of his Shaun. And whereas distracted, for was not just this an effect which had just caused that the effect of that which it had caused to occur, the four justicers laid their wigs together, Uncius, Muncius, Pontius, and Pilax, but could do no worse than promulgate their standing verdicts of Nolans Bromans, when on after King, having murdered all the English he knew, picked out his pockets and left the tribunal scot-free, trailing his Tommy-Lommy's tunic in his hurry, thereunder proudly showing off the blink patch to his Briditit to prove himself, and please use a rail genteel, to the Swiss bobbyguards curial but court-like, Commodore Valley O'Harry, Arthur Jenny Rosie, The fire-water louver returted with such a vine-smelling 42 ages round down hem's tan you hide, as would the Latin stomach even of a Thomas Aquinas. We were prepared for the chap's clapped cap, the accent, but took us as by surprise, and now we're gishing it like gush gash from a burner, so that all the 2 from 30 advocatesses within echo pulling up their briefs at the crig cry, "Shun the punman," safely and soundly sockered that Fenimine parish poser. How dare he? Unpromptu right away hames, much to his thanks, gratia sagum, to all the wrong donatrices, bis drink battles, dingy dwellings where, for like your true Venus in Esau, he was dove timid at the deers at bottom. He shat in zoo, like the muddy gold-blind, who he was done. The chastity's bells conclaiming, you and your gift of your gaft of your garbage a bot our farther. The gain gridando, hun verg now puter scam shams shames. And so it all ended. Artha Kama Dharma Mosca. Ask Kaya for the K. And so everybody heard their plaint, and all listened to their applause. The letter, and the soother, the bither, of eyebrow penciled and lip stipple penned, borrowing a word and begging the question, and stealing under tinder and slipping like soap, from dark Rassalane a sigh and a weep, from Lesbia Louche the beam in her eye, from lone Coogan Barry his arrow of song, from Shaun Kelly's anagram, a blush at the name, from I am the Sullivan, that trumpeting tramp, from suffering Dufferin, the sit of her style, from Kathleen May Vernon, her maybe fair efforts, from Phil the Pot Curran, his Scotch love Macreather, from him up to Philadelphus, the weary the leery from Samuel Lever, or Damuel Lover, that jolly old Molly bit, or that bored saunterer by, from Tim Finns again, weak tribes, loss of strength to his sowil, from the wedding on the green, a girlies, a greatest of joy boys, from Pat Mullen, Tom Mallon, Dan Meldon, Don Malden, a slick stick picnic made in more by Muldoons, the solid man saved by his sillied woman, crack-a-jolking away like a hearse on fire. The elm that whimpers at the top told the stone that moans when stricken. Wind broke it, wave bore it, reed wrote of it, Sice ran with it. Hand tore it in wild went war, hen treeved it in plight pledged peace. It was folded with cunning, sealed with crime, uptied by a harlot, undone by a child. It was life, but was it fair? It was free, but was it art? The old hunks on the hill read it to perlection. It made Ma make merry and Sissy so shy, and rubbed some shine off Shem and put some shame into Shaun. Yet Una and Ita spill famine with draught and Agrippa. The pras pastored spells tribulations in his strain. Fructa, timid anades, enamilo meloman, frey is frau and swee is two and swoo is free, animala woe is we. A pair of sycophantes with amygdalene eyes, one old obster lumpy pumpkin and 3 meddlers on their slies. And that was how Fram sin from sun a city arose, fin, fun, a sitting arrows. Now tell me that. Was it? So there you are. Now there they were. When all was over again, the four with them, sitting around up in their judges' chambers in the monument room of their Marshalsea, under the auspices of Lally, around their old traditional tables of the law, like so many Solons to talk it over, row this the same again. Well, and truly dry, suffering law the dring, according to King's Evelyns, so help her goat and kiss the book. Festives and hijinks and Jinty John and the Beatty Rossi Betty Doherty, and not to forget now O'Dona O'Darnell, the four of them, and thank court now there were no more of them. So pass the push for port's sake, be it soon, ah-ho. And do you remember Singabob, the bad father, the same, the great how-do-you-call-him, and his old nickname, Dirty Daddy Pantaloons, in his monopoliums, behind the War of the Two Roses, with Michael Victory, the Sheman's priester, before he caught his paper dispensation from the Poke, Old Minas and Minster York? Do I mind? I mind the gush off the man like Ballybock manure works on the trade wind's day, and the O'Moily Gracies and the O'Brieny Rossies chaffing him bloke-face and playing him pranks. How do you do, North Mister? Get into my way. Ah, dear for sallow she. Gone over the bays. When gin a body, meet a body. Yera, why would he heed that old gasometer with his whooping coppin and his dying boosy cough, and all the birds of the south side after her, Minxie Cunningham, their dear divorcee darling, Jimmies and Johnnies to be her Joe? Hold hard, there's 3 other corners to our Isle Cork float. Sure, 'tis well I can smell him, H2CE3, that would take a towship's breath away. God, and I knows him too well as I do myself, heaving up the quay wall by the 32 to 11, with his lime-looking horse-bags full of sesame seed, the white-side Kaffir, and his Siemens effluvium, and his scent-painted voice, puffing out his thundering big brown cabbage. Pah! Thought I'm glad a gull for his paws Dean fun. Go, Bory, says he, lanky shade. Go bugger ye, says I. Oh, breezes, I sniffed that lad long before anyone. It was when I was in my father out at the west, and she and myself and red-headed girl first nighting down Sycamore Lane. Fine field play we had of it mid the kissabets frisking in the cool kirkle dust of the lushiness. My perfume of the pampas, says she, meaning me, putting out her nether lights, and I'd sooner one precious sip at your pure mountain dew than enrich my acquaintance with that big brewer's belch. And so they went on, the 4-bottle men, the analysts, Ungwum and Nungwum and Lungwum again, their Anschluss about her who's before, and his whereafters, and how she was lost away in the fern, and how he was founded deep on deep in an ear, and the rustlings and the twitterings and the raspings and the snappings, and the sightings and the paintings, and the yucca cooings and the spring apartings and the bye-bye scuttlings, and all the scandal monkers and their pure craigs that used to be up that time living and lying and rating and riding round Nunsbelly Square, and all the buds in the bush, and the laughing jackass, Harrick, 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 the rose is white in the darrick, this son fella's nose has got rhinoceros from haunting the rose in the parrick, so all rogues lean to rhyme, and the contradicting themselves about Lily Trilly Law Pawn Hilly, and Mrs. Nile of the 9 Corsages, and old Marcus their best far, and sure there was never a Marcus at all among the Manleys, and dear Sir Armory, queer Sir Romery, and the old house by the Chirpelizade, and all the goings on so very wrong long before when they were going on retreat, in the old Gameldags, the four of them, in Milton's Park, under lovely Father Whisperer, and making her love with his stuff in the languish of flowers, and feeling to find was she mushy, and wasn't that very both of them, the saucy sisters, a drahareen o macree, and peep, meeting waters most improper, peepet, ball round the garden, trickle, 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 triss, please, my man, may I go flirting? Farmers gone with a groom, and how they used her, licked her, and cuddled. I differ with ye. Are you sure of yourself now? You're a lawyer, excuse me. I will not, and you're another. And Lully holding their breach of peace for them. Poo-lolly, to give and to take, and to forego the past, and all will be forgotten. Ah-ho, it was too bad to be falling out about their kindness pet in the shape of orang's time. Well, all right, Lily, and shake a hand, and shank us more, for Craig's sake, be it sock. Well, even should not the framing up of such figments in the evidential order bring the true truth to light as fortuitously as a dim seer's setting of a star chart might, heaven helping it, uncover the nakedness of an unknown body in the fields of blue, or as forhearingly as the sib speeches of all mankind have foliated earth seizing them. From the root of some funner's staughter, all the soundest sense to be found immense, our special mentalists now holds, securus indicat orbis terrarum, that by such playing possum our hagius curious ancestor bestly saved his brush with his posterity, you charming copper sinners, us, heirs of his tailsea, gun-dogs of all breeds, were beagling with renounced Irby and Dorbic bugles, hot to run him, given law, on a scent breast high, keen for the worry, view, from his holt out ratted across the Jewtide's genial courselands of Humphrey's Chase, from Mullinahob and Peacockstown, then bearing right upon Tankardstown, the outlier, a white Norlin, which Mr. Lowenstyle Fitzurse's basset beaters had first misbadgered for a brim of some swart, led Byers the run, then through Raystown and Horlockstown, and looping the loop to Tankardstown again. Ere canny hair, for doubling through Cheeverstown they raced him, through Laughlinstown and Nutstown to wind him by the bullies. But from the good turn when he last was lost, check upon ye hill of rot in full winter coat, with ticker pads, pointing for his rooming houses, his nordist in his road to proyal Hessians, a deaf Fulksr's Vulpanism, hid him close in covert, miraculously raven-fed and buoyed up in rumour, reticule, onisum, and obamasum, upon may Aubrywam have his mead. The cream-clotted sherriness of cinnamon syllabub, mickle-raved, nickel-saved, hence hounds hide home. Preservative perseverance in the re-education of his intestines was the rebuttal by Wilkie sort of get the big bulge on the whole bunch of spassokers, dieting against glues and gravies, in that sometime pre-street pro-town. Vainly virulence, and vituperation sought well-nigh utterly to attack and abridge, to derail and depontify, to enrate and enroad, to ongode and unhume the great shipping mogul and underlinen overlord. But the spoil of hesitance, the spell of hesitancy, he attack is it ash, tittery taw tattery tail, hesitance, humpin' a dimply, hey, a wincy winky. Assemblymen murmured, Reynard is slow. One feared for his days. Did there yawn? 'Twas his stomach. Eruct the liver. A gush from his visuals. Pung, deliver him, our Lord. He had laid violent hands on himself. It was brought in Fugger's newsletter. Lain down, all in fagged out, with equally melancholy death. For the triduum of Saturnalia, his goat-servant had paraded his willing sons in the forum, while the Jenny infanted the lass, to be greeted raucously, the yard stated, with hoax and sveas, and measured with missiles too, from 100 of manhood and a wimmering of waves. Big went the bang, then wide was quiet. A report, silence. Last farmer put it under ether. The noise of the lull had driven him blem, stun blem. Sparks flew. He had fled again. Open Shunshima, this country of exile, sloughed off sidle-homed, via the subterranean shored with bedboards, stowed away and anchored in a Dutch-bottomed tunk, the Arsa, Hod SS Finlandia, and was even now occupying, under an Islamitic new name, knew him in his 7th generation, a physical body, Cornelius McGrath's, bad old character, common or wrong canbung, in Asia Major, whereas Turk of the theatre, first house off Latty, the king 11 sharps, he had bepiastered the Bouygues dance uses from the opulence of his omnibox, while as Arab at the street core he bepestered the Bumbashaws for the alms of a Paris pence. Wires hummed. Peacefully general astonishment, assisted by regretitude, had put a term till his existence. He saw the family Sagarth, resigned, put off his remainders, was recalled and scrap-heaped by the maker, chirpings crossed, an infamous private ailment, vulgo varioveneral, had claimed end right, closed his vicious circle, snap. Jams jarred. He had walked towards the middle of an ornamental lily pond, when inebriated up to the point where the braced shirts meet knickerbockers, as wangfish daring at the buoyant waters, when Rodman's first stating hands had rescued un from very possibly several feel of demi-fresh water. Mush spread. On Umbrella Street, where he did drinks from a pumps, a kind workman, Mr. Whitlock, gave him a piece of wood. What words of power were made fast between them, ichnames and ochnomes, agnomina, that did Hansard tell us, would Gargan's dub's ear wag, in every pub of all the city. Batty believes a batten, while Hogan hears a hod, yet here prefers a pencil sharpener, and cope and bull go cup and ball. And the Cassidy, Craddock Rome, and ream round ere a weege, ne'er a wadge, is still immer and immore a wagering over it, a cradle with a care in it, or a casket with a kick behind. Toties, testes, quoties, questies, the war is in words, and the wood is the world. Maply me, willowy wee, hickory he, and you yourselves. How for him chirrupeth ever each bird, from gold dawn glory to glow-worm gleam. We were law-quacks, did we not tacit turn, else were there here no concern of the Guinnesses, but only the ruining of the rain has heard, as stout poor porter cracklings cricked, a human pest cycling pst and recycling past about the sledgy streets. Here he was, pust again, more nuisance noised. He was loose at large, and oh, baby, might be anywhere when a disguised ex-nun of huge stand-build and masculine manners in her fairly fat 40s, corpulenta gigasta, attracted attention by arbitrary conduct with a omnibus. Aerials buzzed to coastal listeners of an Ortax Broer collector's budget. Footy-bigs, sporting tie tuft tabard and bloody anti-chill cloak its tailors, bairnfathers, tab reading VPH, found nigh Skull Brothers Hall. Hold, and divers shivered to think what kind of beast, wolves, cropuses, or fourpenny friars had devoured him. C.W. cast wide, Fin slick, drawnest vertgleam, Valker locked. On his pinkster's postern, the boys had it, at Whit Weekend had been nailed an inked up name and title, inscribed in the national cursives, accelerated, regressive, filiform, turreted, and venomolopes in pigotry. Move up, Mumpty, move room for Rumpty, by order Niceculus Plug. And this go, no Pentecostal jest about it, how gregarious his race soever, or skilful, learned, wise, cunning, knowledgeable, clear, profound, his saying, fortitudo fraught, or prudentia proven, were he chief, count, general, field marshal, prince, king, or Miles the Slasher in his person, with a molia mortar mansion in the Breffnian Empire, and a place of inauguration on the hill of Tullymungan, there had been real murder of the Rehilach Roigo Raxacratian variety. The Macmahon chaps it was, that he had done him in. On the Fid of Verdure, the rampart combatants had left him lying with his dexter handcope, rest erected in a pureed pomade bloody proper. Indeed, not a few thick and thin well-wishers, most of the Clontarf-minded class, Colonel John Ball O'Rourke, Firks exemplis, even ventured so far as to loan or beg copies of de Blancey's trilingual tri-weekly, Scatterbrain's afting post, so as to make certain sure one time and be satisfied of the quasi-contribucidotarians having become genuinely, quite, beatly dead, whether by land, whither by water. Transocean Attila clamoured him, the latter. Shall their hope then be silent, or MacFarlane lack of lamentation? He lay under leagues of it, in deep Bartholoman's deep. Achtung, Posor, Attention, Vikeror beside smoky young pig schoolies. Try pace dinners, Eventir med Loughlaner, Fathach I, Fionix Haven, Banana Lana Bangs Ballyhooly, out of her bouderay of a Boulavogue. But, their bright little contemporaries notwithstanding, on the morrowing morn of the suicidal murder of the unrescued expatriate, as like as a snake comes sliduant down that oak tree onto the Duke of Beavers, you may have seen some liquid amber exude exotic from a balsam poplar at Partina Lax limestone, rode and cried, Abes magnifica, not noble fur. 9:15, imploring his recipiency, saw the infallible spike of smokes just stiff punctual from the seventh gable of our Quintus Centimachus's porphyroid butter tower, and then thirsty PM with oaths upon his lastingness, en caecos hospices annos longos patimur, the lamps of maintenance, beacons far afield, inner half the zuggurat, all brevet named, the wasting wyvern, the tawny of his mane, the swings low swaying blue paw, the outstanding man, the lolly-like lady, being litten for the long, O land, how long, life's night, with suffusion of fine glass transom and lead-light panes. Wherefore let it hardly by any being thinking be said either or thought that the prisoner of that sacred edifice, where he an Ivor the boneless or an Olaf the hide, was at his best a one-stone parable, a rude breathing on the void of to be, a venter hearing his own balk speech in backwards, or more strictly, but tristerned initials, the clue key to a world room beyond the room world, for scarce one, or pathetically few of his Dode Canal salmon livers cared seriously or for long to doubt with Kurt Jude Van Dyck the gravitational pull perceived by certain fixed residents, and the capture of uncertain comets chance drifting through our system, suggesting an authenticitatum of his aliquitudinous, the canonicity of his existence as a tesseract. Be still, O quick, speak him dumb. Hush, ye fronds of Ulma. Dispersal women wondered. Was she fast? Do tell us about all we want to hear all about. So tell us all about her. The why or whether she looked a lotty like a Lucy in Ussies, or whether he had his wind up like them's his shut. Notes and queries, tippids and answers, the laugh and the shout, the ards and downs, now listed to one another, and list them down, and smoothen out your leaves of rose. The war is over. Whim, 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 whim. Was it Unity Moore, or Estella Swift, or Verinia Fay, or Quarta Quaidum? Thomas Markham for your uncle. Pig eyes, hold up med your leg. Who, for second time of asking, was then the scourge of the parts about folk-rich localized? It was wont to be asked, as in ages behind of the Homo Capite Erectus, what price Peabody's money, or, to put it bluntly, whence is the Harrington's white cravat, as in epochs more Cainozoic, who struck Buckley's, though nowadays, as then times, every school filly of 70 moons or more who know her etymologies, and every Colleen Bon Aroof, and every red flannel waving war wife and widow piece upon Dublin wall forever knows as Yayas is Yayas how it was Buckley's self. We need no blotting paper to tell it neither. Who struck, and the Russian generals da, instead of Buckley, who was caddishly struck by him when be herselves. What full pride Paul poisoned in the spy of 3 castles, or which hate-filled smiley cellar, and that such a vitriol of venom, that Queen's head affranchisement, a quiet, stinking plaster zeal could cover, prepostered or post-paid. The lounge lizards of the pump room had their 9 days' jeer, and Pratt's cats at their Platch pails too, and Haulin Paulindom beside, Spissimus, the Jenny Johnnies, when, still believing in her Owen glass, when izars were twinklings, that the upper reaches of her mouthless face and her impermanent waves were the better half of her, one nearer him, dearer than all, first warming creature of his early morn, bondwoman of the man of the house, and murmur of all the Machiavics, she who had given his eye for her bed, and a tooth for a child, till 1 1 and 1 10, and 100 again, oh me, and oh ye, carrot and prin, the hungry and angreen, and if she is older now than her teeth, she has hair that is younger than thine, my dear. She who shuttered him after his fall, and waked him without sparing, and gave him keen, and made him able, and held adazillas to each arch of his nose. She who will not rast from her running to seek him till, with the help of the oceanic, some such time that she shall have been after hiding the crumends of his enormousness, in the are you looking for pearl far sea, Uria, stood forth. Burn the Gorgony o Danwald, in Gogur's name, for Gager's sake, dragging the countryside in her train, Finnegan here and Funnegan there, with her Louis Queen's brogues and her colander buzzle, and her little bolero boa, and all in 2 times 20 cornies for her headdress, specks on her io, and spuds on her eyes, and a circus fix riding her Parisien's cockneys. Avant her straddle from equerry egan, when tink in the church close clinked, stepped to Lough Jazzy my Sunday, so la, with pawns, prelates, and pukas palleting in her piece bag, for handyman the chomp esquiro, bisque basque, to crush the slander's head. Very weeny white, plead for more and more, Notre Dame de la Ville, mercy of thy balm heartsy heat. All groundings beyond her batate, wart of the druggist, bulk him no bulkus, and let him rest, thou wayfar, and take no grave spoil from him, neither mar his mound, the bane of Tot is on it. Where? But there's a little lady waiting, and her name is ALP, and you'll agree she must be she, for her hold in hairy heaps hanging down her back. He spent his strength a mock harum-scarums, Poppy Narency, Gialia, Clora, Marinka, Annaline, Parme, and ilka those dames had her rainbow humours yet, for Wilco her whims, but he coined a cure. Tiff today, kissy today, an age-long pine tomorrow. Then who but crippled with children would speak up for dropping with sweat? Sold him your lease of 990 tresses undresses, so die dainty, good a groot gudgeon gulped it all. Who was the COD? Bum. At Island Bridge she met her tide, at a boom, at a bomb, at a boom. The Finn had a flux and his Ebba a ride, at a boom, at a bum, at a bum. We're all up to the ears in hues and crivies. That's what she's done for we. Whoa. Nomad may roam with Nabuk, but let Naaman laugh at Jordan. For we have taken our sheets upon her stones, where we have hanged our hearts in her trees, and we list as she bibs us by the waters of Babylon.